Wow, hi everybody, out again. The antidote to Christmas. So we've managed to sneak out for a night. I've got Lone Wolf with me, and we decided we were going to have anything except turkey and chicken. So I've brought some stewing beef. We're going to have a little bit of a stew, so potatoes, carrots, parsnips, some tomato puree, and oxo or kind of bisto, you know, in there to generate a gravy, and that's going to be the evening meal. So I'm just about to blanch off the steak and then put the stew together sort of as normal. But really good to be out. Hope everyone out there had a great Christmas. Sorry I've been on the missing list, but I'm heading back to work in the middle of February, and I'm busy doing courses here, there and everywhere to get back current, so that's why I've been on the missing list. But we're out tonight for sort of today, tonight and tomorrow, so we'll be sharing that with you. So dinner, we're having a stew. Let's go. Wow, so we love a bargain. I've just heated up a little drop of cooking oil. Grabbed this at my local shop, which was British beef, reduced from, he says, only £4.25 down to £1.09. So literally just popped that out of the freezer before I walked out the door. I'm just going to sear it off in the pan before putting it in the before just transferring it into the camp oven so that we can get the stew on the fire. Nice stew coming up. So just a big handful of root vegetables. Got some potatoes, carrots, parsnips, red onion, a little bit of tomato puree, which is my kind of one of my little secret ingredients. I love this stuff to knock up a stew. It's really useful little trick, and it's such a small tin, it's great. So I'm going to peel those off, get them in the camp oven, and get them on the fire. Right, Rich is kind enough to just get me a let's say a litre of water off the top of my head. So that's all our kind of root vegetables and a red onion. This is the tomato puree that's going in, which is great for a stew. It just gives it that little bit of a zing. I'm going to dig out an oxo cube, or I might have some kind of bisto gravy in the fridge, and then I'm going to pop that bit of beef on the top, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is dinner. Okay, just pop the beef on the top there, lid on, campfire, hour, maybe two, just keep an eye on it, and bring it back when we are ready to serve. So I've just put some garlic paste in there, got a little bit of barbecue sauce I'm just going to squirt in. Just got a few gravy granules. Last thing to do, just give it a bit of a stir. Made short work of this little extra pile of firewood. Wow, morning people. A little after 6 in the morning. I didn't have a very comfortable night in the rooftop tent. Woke up with an incredible backache. I think that's just because I'm sort of getting over a little bit of kind of winter flu, but the aches and pains really took me by surprise. I saw Pete Wiseman over the Christmas holiday, and you know, like grumpy old men, we were talking about the fact that the clock's ticking and we're not getting any younger. And we both kind of pooh-pooh it at the time, but waking up this morning, I can feel the years advancing for sure. It's very mild, it's not particularly cold. Quite a lot of rain overnight, but more sort of squally showers, you know, on and off than torrential rain. The ground up here is incredibly wet, so we may have some dramas getting out of this little woodland, but we'll see how we go with that. The plan really is to have a sort of lazy morning. You know, we're going to finish off the stew, I think, because that was really nice, on a bit of crusty bread, and maybe have a couple of eggs on top of that. Rich is having a bit of a lay-in. He's been doing all sorts of hours at work. He's one of these people that can't sit still, you know, so he'll sort of do 12 or 14 hour shifts at work, then he'll go to kind of recreational hobby type activities. Then when eventually you catch up with him, he'll do nothing but complain about how tired he is. But like I say, he's just one of those people that he wouldn't have it any other way. Well, that's my morning. Not too shabby, eh? Okay, so as always, roughing it in the field. That's the last of last night's stew. Bit of crusty bread, a couple of eggs. Lone Wolf's here, mate. He seems really happy with it.
I'm ready for that.
And so am I. So service. Okay, so over the last couple of weeks, if anyone follows my Instagram account, you'll see that I put a little kind of medical trauma kit together about a week, 10 days ago now. Just want to share it with you really on YouTube. The main kind of driving force really was the, you know, kind of Muslim fundamentalist terrorist attacks on the streets of London. And I was thinking more of a sort of covert type medical kit that you could carry, that would have the bare essentials, wouldn't take up a lot of space, and that hopefully you could kind of make a difference and save a life with. I'm going to drop in a few photographs of the bits and pieces individually, and then I'll just sort of stick them all together and give you a brief chat about why I've chosen them. First thing I've put in my little kit, this is a kind of horizontal carry trauma scissor pouch. So in here you can put your trauma shears and your forceps. So I normally carry a couple of pairs of forceps, different lengths, and I've also got what's called a renal clamp, which is basically a disposable little set of forceps, and always found them to be really handy, you know. Decent set of trauma shears. It's a sort of standing joke where if you've got a good pair of trauma shears, you should be able to cut a penny in half, and it was a kind of pre-hospital care ambulance type joke, you know, that if you ever found anyone trapped under a penny, you could rescue them. But that's how substantial a pair of trauma shears should be. When you're using your shears, don't be frightened, you know. If it's all come on top, you know, really the alternative is death, you know. So what I would kind of do with these is unzip clothing, normally on the seam, you know, so up the side seam of the trouser leg. If I was doing a secondary survey, so you check airway, C-spine, and then kind of move on to a full body assessment, But what I used to do with my trauma shears is literally just sort of unzip the clothes on the back of the patient from the sort of hem of the jacket, the shirt, right up to the neck. And what that enabled me to do is when I'd got them log rolled onto a spinal board and onto the ambulance, then the clothes just come straight off the front of the body. Then I had the opportunity to do a thorough secondary survey. You know, sometimes what you're looking for is a puncture wound. So if you imagine, you know, you've been stabbed maybe with a skewer, a meat skewer, it might be 8 or 10 inches long, you know, but the puncture wound itself will be a very, very tiny little dot, and it may not even be bleeding. It's the sort of thing I came across when I worked in the townships in Africa. They used to use bicycle spokes and zip them to a sharp point spike and put them in just under the diaphragm. And when you do your secondary survey, the patient didn't have any wounds at all, but of course they were catastrophic injuries. You see the X-ray and you see these great big sort of white lines where this spike has gone in and through the internal organs. So decent pair of trauma shears will enable you to remove clothing at speed and accurately assess further injuries of your patient. I carry 3 different sets of forceps. Like I say, one pair is slightly bigger than the other. Sort of thing I've used these for in the past is I had a patient once who was choking on a denture. So he had been assaulted, there was a sort of an altercation, but he'd actually swallowed his denture. And I kind of opened the airway. I could just see it at the back of his throat. Now there is a purpose-made set of forceps called McGill forceps, which are curved and designed to recover things from the airway. But they're also about 10 to 12 inches long, you know, so not very practical to carry in a sort of covert kit. But these, with the stretch of your fingers, would go a considerable way down the airway to recover any sort of dentures, obstacles, you know, call it what you will. They're also great for temporarily closing wounds or blood vessels, 2 sizes. These are like the renal forceps, they're disposable, and any renal unit will have these. What they tend to do is use them on giving sets and drips to just turn on, turn off the tube basically. But they're also great for, like I say, holding clothing out the way. They are, I found over time, really useful, and they're also disposables, you know, so if they become, once you've used them on a job, don't think twice about just binning them. But you'll find those readily available on most medical supply companies, and they're for nothing, but they were a good little gadget. Had some questions about airways, you know, so we've got a Covert airway and a nasopharyngeal airway. These are for an adult male. In truth, I've got them in my kit. I have to turn around and say, 20 years on the front line as a paramedic, I never used either of them in anger. You know, someone said to me the other day, you know, do you have to use KY jelly on them? And ideally you do. I did work in operating theatres from time to time, and there they used kind of KY jelly. But in a traumatic event, there's normally quite a lot of saliva, blood, soft tissue damages. You know, you rarely, if ever, have trouble trying to slide something like this in. You know, and just remember, with a nasopharyngeal airway, it goes backwards and not upwards. And it sort of floats around your cheekbone, so let's say it ends up somewhere near your kind of molars at the back of your cheek. And obviously a oropharyngeal airway sort of goes in upside down, get it in 3/4 of the way, rotate it and ease it in. But they are my airway management. Disposable gloves, I carry 4 pairs of disposable gloves, 2 with each little kit, you know, and I would give you the idea of putting 2 pairs of gloves on at once. So when you put your gloves on, put 2 pairs of gloves on. Simply speeds up going from patient to patient. You know, I once went to a bank robbery in a place called Ramburg where I had 18 people with gunshot wounds. 2 guys walked in a bank, they shot everybody, and there was no one to get them the money. But when you're going from patient to patient, it kind of speeds things up, so you just take a pair of gloves off. With regards to kind of injuries, and you know, what I used to do is I used to write my observations on the patient. So when I got to the patient, I would write the time, all the interventions that I did, you know, actually physically write them on the patient, because when you've got a kind of major incident, quite a lot of casualties. In truth, other people are arriving, they're taking on patients, you're not going to be able to just stop what you're doing and go back and give them a proper handover. So I used to write things on the patient, and in the kit is a little Sharpie pen, you know, for exactly that. When it comes to kind of trauma dressings then, these emergency trauma dressings are my dressing of choice. They're about 6 inches square, and they've got the kind of direct pressure lock on the dressing. It's very similar to the Israeli trauma dressing. I carry 2 of these. Like I say, both 6 inches square. They come in their own packets. They are sterile until you open them. The packets you can also use for chest seals, and you know, maybe I'll go into that a little bit more, but you could, you know, search on YouTube and you'll find how people use plastic packaging to make chest seals. The other thing I got in the kit is a little packet of quick clot. This is about 25 grams. Really, it's just a kind of pad, you know, so maybe a little bag, and it's a clotting agent. So if you have an arterial bleed, you know, imagine perhaps you have really been full thickness kind of stabbed with some sort of kitchen knife, hunting knife. You'll know you've got an arterial bleed because the blood will spurt anywhere from sort of, you know, 10 to 20 feet every time the heart contracts and pumps, so you get a big spurt of blood. You literally just put the little packet of quick clot on or even in the wound. Then you're going to put a pressure dressing over the top of it. You literally just do kind of one wrap, twist the bandage, wrap again, and if the blood comes through the first dressing, then all you do is simply put the second dressing on the top. You know, all we're trying to do is to encourage the clotting process. If you take one dressing away and replace it, all that happens is you also remove all of the clotting agent that's just managed to build up. But these are not massive, they go in a coat pocket or something like that. So the idea is my little scissor pouch goes on the back of my belt trousers, and I would have a couple of packets like this in my coat pockets. All go in a little pouch, much like that, so it's not the end of the world. The other thing that I do is I put a few cable ties in. Cable ties are great for direct pressure on a wound. Sometimes it's just very difficult to find the perfect dressing to fit. Maybe if someone's been stabbed under the armpit or something like that, it's very difficult to hold a dressing in place. I've always found cable ties just I've got half a dozen about 10-inch long ones there, but they were a bit of a trick. Obviously, if you're going to use something like this, you've got to be aware of the fact that you haven't put a tourniquet on somebody, so you need to check the distal pulse and you need to check it fairly often. The last thing in my kit really is a decent sort of cat tourniquet. This is a kind of trauma dressing tourniquet. It can be applied, designed to be applied yourself, you know, so if you are the person injured, completely possible for you to apply a cat tourniquet. What you're looking to do is kind of control extensive bleeding, possibly kind of arterial bleeding with the tourniquet, get some pressure on it, and that will enable you to have time to put a pressure dressing on, to use your quick clot, and to control sort of catastrophic bleeding. Another thing that I do, this is just Gorilla Tape, 2 inches wide, 2 lengths of 1 metre. And like I said, you know, this is really my equivalent of a proper sort of thoraceal chest seal, chest dressing. You know, like I said, when I worked in Africa, people used to get stabbed with sort of meat skewers and bicycle spokes and things like that. Sometimes they would even run that through an orange, so you've got citric acid on it. They would stab somebody, the acid would seal the wound. So when you did your secondary survey, if you were lucky, you might just see a dot of blood, but not always. But what that potential kind of wound is a sucking chest wound, and what that's going to do is going to suck air in. And what I used to use this tape for really was anything that I thought was a penetrating injury, a sucking chest wound. I'd get my Sharpie pen, I'd put a big circle around it, and I'd stick a 2-inch square piece of Gorilla Tape right over the top of it. And that was my sort of immediate action drill. The other thing is that if you've got a dressing, like I say, that's absolutely drenched with blood, that won't stay in place, you know, the old Gorilla Tape is perfect, because you just rip it off and you literally just... So wrap it around the limb completely, as if you were maybe winding it around a log, but then get your trauma shears and just cut a line through the tape. And what that'll ensure is that you haven't got a tourniquet in place, you know. So what I used to use sometimes would be a stick or a pair of scissors or something. I'd literally put something on the bottom of the limb, wrap the tape round, and that gave me somewhere to put in my trauma shears and just zip it open. So you've got direct pressure on the wound, it's holding your dressing in place, and it's tiny, you know. So it's not sterile, but what we're talking about is the alternative to death. Last thing I think is absolutely imperative, you know, if you have a kind of major incident, if you have some sort of traumatic event and you're the kind of first person on scene, you need to be able to call for help. You need to be able to tell people that you know, you're committed, you're doing your best, you're trying to save a life. Major incidents, you tend to sort of get overlooked. People are dealing with patients, maybe unconscious patients, and they're kind of left to get on with it, really. If something's going catastrophically wrong and you want to raise the alarm, I've found nothing better than a whistle, you know. You start blowing a whistle, people are going to start looking at you, and that's your opportunity to say, come to me, help me, you know. The same, I always have a torch, because that event might happen at night, you know, so you can turn the torch on, you can start waving it around, blowing your whistle. Only a matter of time before hopefully people come and give you assistance. Triage at major incidents is shocking and overwhelming. If you've got a lot of casualties, first people that arrive on scene are normally kind of shocked and overwhelmed. So I learnt triage from a South African paramedic who was very experienced and a genius at his craft. But very simply, James taught me, you know, I turned up at this bank robbery I was telling you about, 18 people with gunshot wounds, and he said, everybody that could stand, move over there. You know, we had 9 people get up and walk to the other side. One guy had been shot through his hand, another guy had been shot through the nape of his neck. You know, and although they were bleeding quite badly, these weren't life-threatening injuries at that particular moment. So then we were left with 10 people, and 6 of those were screaming their heads off, so they had patent airways. 4 of them were quiet. One of the quiet ones was dead. So those 3 quiet people are where you start your triage. The other thing is, don't be reluctant to put people to work helping each other. You know, so I had a chap with a severed brachial artery, and if you do nothing about an arterial bleed, the patient becomes hypovolemic, they go into shock, they have a cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, and then they die. So it's imperative you do something about the bleed. You know, so what I did was a couple of those dressings on the wound, direct pressure, then I put a BP cuff over the top of that. I inflated the BP cuff until the distal pulse disappeared. Now I've got a tourniquet. I let the cuff down until the distal pulse just came back. Then what I did was kind of elevated the wound. I got a bystander. I said, stay with this chap. If he goes quiet, come and get me. Move on to the next patient. So if I had to summarise 20 years experience in EMS, I would turn around and say, if somebody comes, normally you live. If nobody comes, normally you die. It's very difficult to get it wrong. You know, a lot of people will say, well, you know, what if I do something wrong? What if I make a mistake? You know, I would turn around and say, in major incidents, traumatic events, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. If you do nothing, that patient will die anyway. You know, so that's how I always used to look at it. There were times that I turned up that I was completely out of my depth, but I did everything I could think of, you know, and there were occasions when I surprised myself when that patient went on to make a full recovery, albeit a kind of a long way down the road. But that's it, you know, if somebody comes, normally you live. If nobody comes, normally you die. And if that patient is seriously injured, they're going to die anyway. So anything you do is going to be a bonus. That's my little medical kit. Just wanted to kind of squeeze that in. I did itemise it on Instagram if anybody goes over there and looks at that account, but just wanted to squeeze it in while I was out. So that's the end of another cheeky 24 hours away. Did meet some people here that were here at the 150 prepper meet. Obviously I've had some great quality time with Lone Wolf, and we've done what old men do, which is just sit down and moan. But 24 hours away has been absolutely brilliant. Hope everybody out there had a great Christmas. This is where I say please thumbs up, share, like, subscribe, and if you're watching on Facebook, please follow. As always, any comments, love to hear them. Back soon.